Welcome in, everybody. It's another episode of the DNVR Rapids Podcast, and we are live from the Toyota Lounge here at DNVR, presented by your Front Range Toyota stores. Big show today, big old show, so we're going to run through the intros real quick. Downtown Duane Brown to my right.
Hello. That is all.
Cowboy Super Yaya to my extreme right.
I'm not that important. Let's move on.
And to my left, friend of the program, returning episode 3, at least,
so.
Rapids President Padraig Smith. Welcome back to the show.
How you doing, guys? Glad to be here.
This is fun. I'm ready for this. Tons to talk about. Some news going this morning from our guy Tommy Scoops, another friend of the program. You got some roster rule changes coming up this summer transfer window, some game day initiatives from the season. Tons to talk about. Probably going to start with the soft news break this morning. Wasn't anything official, no transaction or anything, but our guy Tommy Scoops. Early morning, I woke up to it. I'm usually an early riser.
Yep.
But it broke early. Everything seems to be going well with the Rafa negotiations. Rafa Navarro. Got to get it right.
Like that pronunciation. Very impressive.
Navarro.
Very impressive. Better you than me on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think with Rafa, I think there's no doubt. We've said it all along. We wanted to keep him here. I think that's important for us. I think he's shown this year the type of production he can bring. And I think on top of the production levels, you know, the last year has allowed us to see the type of character he is in the locker room, how he fits into the culture of the group, and then how he fits in from a game model perspective. You know, the work he does against the ball is first rate. I think he's probably the best defensive 9 in the league. We always felt he could score goals, and he has certainly shown that. You know, in the first half of this season, you know, it didn't work so well for him last year, but last year was a team that wasn't creating a lot. And I think as he's had opportunities, he's taken them, and some really, really top goals as well. You know, you look at the goal against NYCFC at City Field, and then the second goal, obviously, against Salt Lake. You know, these are really high class goals. So we've said all along we want to keep him, but that's got to be at a valuation that we think is right. I think the good thing is that Rafa wants to stay, and that in Palmeiras we've got a club that we've built a good relationship with over the years. We've obviously done a few different transactions with them, and I would say that everybody is, you know, we're continuing to have discussions, and I think everybody is, you know, working towards what we hope is a positive solution for all parties.
You said that he likes being here, and that's clear at training. Him and Omir Fernandez, another new signing from the offseason, former Red Bull, comes over, and they seem to just be thick as thieves.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, they're inseparable, and they've always got a smile on their face as well. You always think they're up to some sort of mischief, but it's always good. And yeah, he's fit in incredibly well into the locker room as well. He's a great guy. I mean, you guys have seen him. You guys have been around him at training and stuff like that. You know, he's a top guy. And Cole Bassett I'd add into that mix as well. Like, Cole's Spanish is probably something that not everybody knows, but he's worked really hard on that to make sure that he can communicate with all his teammates. Half his Spanish is obviously very good. He's done really well to learn English as well, and to make sure that he can integrate into the group. But it's been really good seeing how they've connected. And obviously from our perspective, you look throughout this, you know, throughout the league, the relationship between the 9s and 10s in this league is important. And I think we see in Georgie and Rafa 2 players who can work together as well. So I think it's a good combination. It's a good fit, and it's certainly something we want to have continue. But we've still got to make sure that it's done the right way. So those negotiations are going to continue. Fran's doing a really nice job leading the charge on that, and I think we're in a good positive spot. But we still have to get this over the line.
With the transfer window coming up, and this negotiation being such a big part for that transfer window, because it's going to dictate where you go, are you guys trying to get that done before it even opens, kind of have the deal in place? Are you guys going to try to get it early, or is it just when it happens?
Yeah, no, the earlier the better, you know, for sure. I mean, we, to be honest, tried to engage quite some time back, and Palmeiras were absolutely right to not engage, right? They wanted to see and give him every opportunity to score, and he certainly did that, which changes the leverage in any kind of negotiation, but it's obviously a good thing from our perspective, right? You want your number 9 scoring goals, and right now he's got 9 goals and 2 assists. Halfway through a season, that puts you on pace for 22 goal contributions, 18 goals over the course of the season. That is top quality production, so that's good. And when you've got a number 10 in Georgie who's got 5 goals and 6 assists, he's also on pace for 22 goal contributions. That's really impressive from both. And I think as a group, when you talk about the transfer window as a whole, like one of the things that we wanted to do, obviously in a reset at the end of last year, was to bring in a bunch of players that really did fit with the culture that we were trying to build and with the game model that we were trying to instill. So if you look at the players that we've brought in, the age profiles are all very similar. These are guys who are committed to the club for an extended period of time, who want to be here, who get on, fit into what Chris Armas is doing, fit into the type of club that we want to be, and who can grow together. We saw that in the past. Players that we brought in 18 really came to their peak in 21. We don't think that's going to take as long this time, because these are guys that at 24, 25, most have been around the league before. Georgie, Omir, Sam Vines coming back, Zach Steffen coming back. They know what it takes in this league. But from an age profile perspective, I think we're the 3rd youngest in the league as a whole, behind the 2 New York clubs. We're the youngest in the West, and this is part of a process. But obviously, getting this one across the line early would be beneficial for everybody. But you need everybody on the same page for that. We can't just click our fingers and make that happen.
Was there a time when you started seeing Rafa score goals consistently that you were like, we're good as a negotiator? Like, please, no more.
No, absolutely not. No.
Seeing the dollar signs shoot out of the net every time.
No. I mean, that's definitely not the way this goes. Like, and it's funny, I had a few people on to me about that, like some national media kind of saying, like, even when he scored the flick header against, I think it was Minnesota, that Moise could have got a touch in at the far post. He was like, man, that might have helped. And you're like, no, I'm going to take our number 9 on a run here.
Right.
That's what we want. And look, he's deserving of everything he's done. He's worked tremendously hard, and it would be very easy. He was 23 last year, only had the 1 goal. It would be easy to let that get to you. But I think he showed his mentality, showed the type of character he is. Never let it affect who he was, never let it affect the work rate that he was putting in for the team, the sacrifices he made for the team. And that's something that Chris, pushes. We've got to sacrifice for each other, right? This is about the collective. It's not about any one individual, but knowing that you've got a 9 at the top of the field that can score is really important. But as I said, it's got to make sense for our roster build as a whole. So we've got to continue with these negotiations and try and get this across the line.
Obviously you want to see as many goals as possible, but
Yes.
we had Sam and Cole on the show sitting right here, and they mentioned, we asked for a bold prediction for the season, and even Cole said we're getting half of 10 goals. And, well, about halfway through, they're pretty much already there.
Yeah.
Was there a moment where it clicked a little more, where it was like, oh yeah, we definitely nailed this one, right? Because there's always a bit of mystery when someone comes in. Is it going to be a fit culturally on the field, in the locker room, all that stuff? But was there a moment, whether this season or even last season or off season, where it was like, oh, we nailed this one?
Well, I think, it's one of the reasons why we do a lot of loan deals. Like, obviously, we've all spoken about that before. Some people are going to agree with that, some people are not. But when you're tasked and responsible for spending the type of money that we are and investing the type of money that we are, the fit culturally is of the utmost importance. A player can be terrific on the field, can produce on the field, but if they are a problem in the locker room and a problem for the group as a whole, that is not something you want to be around. I mean, you don't have to look too far in MLS to see instances of that where it just hasn't worked out, and no talent should ever be enough to override the collective, in our opinion. That's the way we want to build a team. So what we saw last year in terms of knowing that we had the right person was the work ethic, was the mentality, and just how he carried himself when things weren't going so well. Because that really is a test, right? When you're scoring goals and doing well, it's easy. Everybody's happy. When you're not doing so well, that really gives you a measure of the person, as a whole. And we knew we had a good person on our hands, especially someone at only 23 who was quite young, coming to a new country, not speaking the language at that point in time. So that really did impress us. I think this year, you know, as he started to score, obviously the first few goals were PKs, but you could see the confidence again. Like, it takes some confidence. And early season, I think it was Orlando in preseason, things weren't going well for us. We were down 2-0 in that game. We weren't playing particularly well. We got a PK, and again, he wanted the ball. Like, and I really do place a lot of value in that. Like, you want a center forward who's got a short memory, right? You talk about closers in baseball. It doesn't matter. You blow a save on a Tuesday, you still got to be able to get out there and finish the job on a Wednesday, right? It's really important, that kind of mentality. And Rafa believes in himself. And we can see it day in and day out in training. We know he's a good finisher. You see the different types of goals all of a sudden he's starting to score. Like, you know, opportunistic goals off set pieces, like the flick header. He's got one where he just gets across the man against San Jose. But then you've got like really outstanding individual efforts against RSL. The little chip, the composure.
Was that RSL?
Yeah,
that was a
RSL.
nice goal, man.
Yeah, so it's different types of finishes. So, you know, we do feel like we've got someone there that fits with what we're trying to do. So look, we nothing's changing here. We've said it all along. This is a player that we want to be here, that we want here for the long term. Having him here for a year has allowed us to really get to know him and get to understand what we would be bringing in. Now we just need to find a solution with Palmeiras and with Rafa. And look, we've other options. We're not like, you know, that's part and parcel of it, right? Our scouts have been actively making sure that we've got backups. But again, for me, with the composition of this roster as it is at the moment, with the age profile, with the characters, like, we've got to be very, very careful, because, you know, it's going to be a very particular type of player that's going to help us get better. And that's a good position to be in.
Kind of looking, you're talking about last year and all the good you saw from Rafa. Did that help you a little bit more with old friend Diego Rubio, that he's coming back to the Dick? Did that kind of, seeing all that practice, seeing how well he was meshing with the team and how hard he was working, did that make it easier to let go of a player like Rubio, who 2 years ago had a historic season for the Rapids?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's never easy to let a player like Diego leave. But I think at the end of the day, we were looking at a reset, you know, and I think that was important for us to say that, you know, and I have to take responsibility for this. I think I allowed us to get a little bit too old. You know, you guys have heard me from my earliest times here. I do believe in young teams. I do believe in athletic groups. I think in MLS, transition is obviously critically important. We've seen that the last few games against us, unfortunately. Like, I think it's really important that we have an athletic unit out there, that we take advantage of altitude and we take advantage of the type of games that you see in MLS. We wanted to go back to that. We wanted to go back to our bread and butter and the philosophy that we have as a club. And to do that, you need a certain profile. And if you look at it even from an injury prevention perspective, right? Younger players are less likely to get injured. Younger players are more likely to be able to put up the type of distance that we're asking of our players. So our game model is a very demanding game model. And I think to do that, you know, you need to have a lot of young legs that can cover the ground. You need experienced heads there as well, though. And I think in the likes of a Maxu, in the likes of a Keegan Rosenberg, even a Connor Ronan, who's not too old, but has got good experience and good know-how. We knew we had some experienced players there. We wanted to make sure that we had a front group that could do the type of pressing that we're going to ultimately want to evolve to. We're not there yet. Like, we're really not. And that's going to be a continuous process and a pathway to get to where we ultimately want to be. But I think we needed to make sure that we had speed, athleticism, and legs in the attacking area. And we just felt a fresh reset was needed there. And I think if you look at our numbers this year in terms of distance covered and what we're doing from that perspective, it's playing out as we hoped. I
mean, this team, if I was on the team, I'd be the oldest player on the team by almost 4 years, right? Your vets are 25, 26, you know, Maxu and Keegan being right around 30. And you said you maybe let it age, but it's tough when you have a team like Rubio and Price and all these guys who build up to that 2021 season. It's understandable to maybe let that run a little longer and see, was that peak? Was that, you know, is there pieces to add to that to keep it sustainable? I mean, it's understandable.
Yeah, it's not anything I regret. I think these are the lessons that you have along the way. You have to make difficult decisions at particular moments in time. And for us, we had built a cycle, you know, as we acquired those players in 18. So the likes even of a Danny Wilson, as well as a, you know, Pricey, Diego, Nico Mosqueda coming in at that point in time. Andre Shinashiki wasn't long after that. Kellen Acosta was brought in. The team that won in 21 was built in 18. That was 18-19, I should say.
Yeah.
That's when that team was built. A lot of those contracts were coming to an end at that particular point in time, but they had been hugely successful. And you do want to give them the opportunity to go again. That means then giving new contracts, and then the team gets a little bit old. And nobody could have predicted the injuries that befell Jack Price in particular, and I think we were deprived of seeing someone who has arguably been the club's best player over the last decade, give another 2 years of service when he was still in his prime. Like he wasn't at a point where he couldn't contribute, but it's tough. And, you tear your Achilles, you break ribs, puncture lung, like those are injuries that nobody can predict. The same for Diego. Like you miss Diego, terrific player, great guy, and served this club so well. Like it is hard to let them go. But, we did reinvest in that group after 21, and we unfortunately weren't able to see what they could do together because of injuries and because of loss of form and things not going the way. And it did mean then that we weren't able to be the type of athletic team that we wanted to be. And unfortunately then in transition moments, in particular in 23, 22, we missed out in the playoffs. I think it was 4 points at the end. We were always in it, but never really in it. And I think that was a bit of a frustrating thing. But 23 just wasn't good enough. And that necessitated a reset. And, unfortunately, you do have to be ruthless in those moments. And that's what we were. And I think, look, we started this season in really good form. And I think we know the talent we've got in the group. We know the mentality we've got in the group. A lot of winners in there, a lot of guys who are really driven to succeed. And I think as you start to see Omir, Georgie, Cole, Cabral, Rafa play more together, that's just going to continue to get better and better. We've already scored more goals this year than we did all of last year. The defensive side, the last couple of weeks hasn't been good, but I'll go to battle with Maxu and Bombito and Vines and Lalas and Keegan, every day of the week. Zach Steffen behind them. Like, this is a good group. The midfield, sure, we thought there was going to be more from Diak. We thought there was going to be more from Connor. Connor suffers an injury, which probably didn't help Diak either, because you're then going in with two unknowns. But just huge credit to Cole and Ollie, for what they've been able to do and the solidity that they were able to bring to that. Again, you look at the demanding nature of our game model. There's going to be ebbs and flows over the course of the season. The team's going to tire. We're going to need to make changes and need to have fresh legs come in. It's part of the process, part of the learning curve, but it's something that I do believe ultimately brings us toward the long-term success that we want to have and the sustainable success that we want to have.
Chris brought this up to me. I'm not even sure what we were talking about, but he was basically saying, Chris Armas was saying, when you look out there of the outfield players, basically 8 of the regulars out there were here and a part of it before. So, you say you make some ruthless decisions, but how, maybe, I don't know if you can speak to just, it was very specific moves versus wide sweeping changes to basically bolster. I don't know if you call it the bones of the team was there already, but what went into that versus like wholesale changes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of conversations, at the front office level. Obviously last year going into the off season, making the change at head coach, like we were very clear about the type of team we wanted to be and about the type of player that we needed to execute against that. And as I said, that allowed us to be very specific in terms of what we were doing. Again, it's not going to come as a surprise to you guys. Like, we want to focus on younger domestic players. Yeah. That's what we want to focus on. Those domestic players may be within the league, but they may be also playing in Europe and coming back like we had in Zach, Sam and Georgie. But these are guys that from an age profile perspective fit, from a character perspective fit, and from our ability to actually reach an elite level fit. We know that about all of them. So it was quite specific in that regard. We were not creating enough chances last year. Our XG was below 1. Like, that's not okay. It's not okay. So you need to bring in someone who's going to be able to create opportunities individually, right? There's going to be systematic creation of chances based on the system that's put in place and the game model and the style of play. But you also need special players in moments. And you look at a Georgie and you look at an Omir, you look at a Cole, like they can all do that. They can all create something from nothing. We've got, in my opinion, the best goalkeeping and set piece coach in the business in Chris Sharp. We want to be dangerous on set pieces. We want to be fast in the attack. We want to be able to create moments in transition. And, Kevin Cabral, I think right now is having a resurgent season. Like it's been really good to see him, and I think he's playing with a level of confidence that he didn't have before. He certainly knows he's got the confidence of the coach behind him, teammates pulling for him. And that's been good because, he can threaten in behind, which again creates more space underneath for Georgie and Omir and Cole. So it's those kind of combinations that you really need. So you're right. It was very, very specific targeted areas that we wanted to improve in. And I think from that perspective, we're pleased with where we are, but it's going to be continuous. We're not there yet. We've got to continue to get better. And this process in terms of implementing a game model and getting back to kind of our basics, it takes a little bit of time. So we're still on that pathway, on the journey.
You brought up Lamine. So I think that was the other report from Tom Bogert today, is that loan isn't going to be, the purchase isn't going to be exercised. The loan's going to end his time here. He was a bit of a late arrival to camp, whether that was visa or whatever it was, or just the process with the French side. What sort of happened there? Why, if whatever you can tell us what didn't work, was it just a misread on cultural fit, or whatever that was, just sort of why wasn't this a more successful move?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, it clearly hasn't worked out. It hasn't worked out the way any of us planned or hoped. And I think it is a frustration because you go in with a very clear sense of what you're looking for, right? We wanted an athlete who could cover ground in the number 6 position to give protection to the back line. That's what we were looking for. Lamine ticks the boxes on that. Lamine's a wonderfully talented player. I think arriving late did hurt him. I think ironically, people wouldn't necessarily connect this, but Connor Ronan going down probably hurt him as well because he arrives late. Ollie comes in. Ollie's playing some games in pre-season. Jasper's there. Cole's starting to drop down. But as soon as Cole and Ollie formed a partnership, those are 2 new players that you weren't anticipating playing in that space. I think had Connor been there, it's probably a little bit easier to give Lamine some minutes, like for Chris. Sense. And I think, look, this is really pained Chris over the last few months. I know he and I have had numerous conversations where he was desperate to give him a game, but as Ollie and Cole continued to perform so well, it's really hard to break up something that's working. And then Jasper obviously had 1 or 2 niggles, but as he's coming in, he needs to get game time too. And I think he's somebody that can slot in because they know the league a little bit better. And then obviously when Connor comes back, you really need to give Connor minutes and to get Connor back into the fray. So it worked out in terms of just a bunch of different circumstances and it not working. And these things happen in football. Like, I still say that in terms of like the identification by the scouts of a player that fit the criteria that we were looking for, Lamine does. Unfortunately, as he came in, a number of circumstances led to him not getting minutes, not getting the opportunity. He's a great guy, fits in with the group, no problem. He's good. He trains well, and he's good around the group. But again, it's one of the reasons why we do a loan, that we're able to make this decision and we're not now sitting with a player that we've signed on a 4-year contract and wondering what we're going to do. It hasn't worked out. And, you see this globally where players come in, and I show my age in this, the one that I keep thinking about when I was younger. And, you look at a Seba Veron who joined Manchester United as one of the best midfielders in the world, and it didn't work out. And there's plenty
tough for my guys at Manchester United.
Yeah, I mean, it was. But Calvin Phillips is probably a better example in more modern times. Good players coming off good years, goes into City, it doesn't work out and moves on. Like these things happen. You always want to, like, one of the things that we do at the end of every year is look at every transaction, in, out, everything we do, including the transactions that are for more MLS stuff, right? Monopoly money, as people would say, but for GAM or for draft picks, international slots, but we evaluate what we were looking at going into the deal, the value of the deal, and then the outcome of the deal. And there's always going to be lessons learned on it. And I think one of the things that we would probably say on Lamine, we had a number of different players that we were looking at there in that role. Like, given the fact that it is a little bit tougher right now to get visas across the line in certain jurisdictions, like, we have to take that into account from a timing perspective. So there'll be lessons that we'll take along the way. Lamine's going to go back to Nantes. Look, he's a talented player. He's going to get another opportunity, but it's better for him to go back somewhere as well where he's going to get more game time. We obviously feel in Cole, Ollie, Connor, and Jasper, we've got really good cover there. But the 6 remains a position that we're looking for, a more, I would say, a more defensive minded. All of those players can play those roles, and particularly in a double pivot, obviously. But that player that can give real protection to our back line is something that remains a key priority for us. Unfortunately, this one didn't work out, and we're going to have to take our lessons from that and move on quickly. I think that's another important thing. Like, there are going to be players that come in and don't work. You've got to make that decision and move on very quickly, so you're not just dealing with it for an extended period of time.
Yeah. Any questions, sir?
No.
A little bit of a two-parter on my end. Last year, we saw the fans be very upset with the Brassards, just as you were. Like, we talked to you afterwards, and you were just as upset as most of us were. And then we saw that last transfer window, you bring in Georgie, and you break the transfer record. And then you might even break this transfer record. What kind of conversation did you have with ownership to get that new reinvestment towards the players? And should we expect a little bit more of those signings coming in that cost $1 million, $2 million, something Rapids fans don't really get that often?
Yeah, I mean, look, we get great support from ownership. Obviously, Kevin Demoff has come in now recently as the president of all teams and media, and there's been a lot of dialogue with him, a lot of dialogue with Josh, with Mike Neary as well. So the support that we have there is really good. And what we do, I think, is the right way to do it. We're trying to outline a plan for a cycle. Like, we look at these things in terms of 4-year periods, because that's how you want to build out groups. Contracts, for the most part, are going to be 3 to 4 years. And you're looking at how do you build for that. And I think one of the things that I would say is we've shown an ability to transition well from poor seasons. So coming in after 17 wasn't good. We knew we were going to need 18. You guys will remember there's a lot of 1-year deals done then, but we also brought in some of the core pieces, 18 into 19, then it went on to 21. What we didn't do well, clearly, was transition well from success in 21. That's a harder thing to do, and that's something that we're clearly thinking about now. What do these next few years look like? That's why if you look at the group that we have, they're all going to age at the same kind of... They're all in an age bracket where their profiles will continue to develop and grow and age at the same time, I would say. So we've got to then think about what does that look like. So we're already able to talk to ownership about what positions we think we're going to need to improve year on year over the next kind of 3 years as we go out of that cycle, and then what we're going to have to do at that point in time. Obviously, we personally want as much of that to come from the academy as possible, then domestic, and then you want to go out. But like, you see the success of R2, and people will be quick to jump to the results of R2 last year. I would say we've had every bit as much success at R2 this year than we had last year. Like, you look at some of the players that have come through in R2, the 2 wingers, like right now, doing really, really good work and getting more exposure at first team training sessions. But you look at some of our academy players, Noah's coming through, you look at what Rahilio's doing, you look at Miggy, this is really important for us. You look at, the young players that we got in the draft this year, in Wayne and Kamani in particular, Nate Jones as well, getting minutes. Wayne and Kamani have had a couple of niggles that stopped it, but getting really important reps. That's a huge part of that. So the work that we're doing with ownership is really predicated on building out a 4-year cycle plan, showing what is needed over that period of time. And thankfully we get tremendous support then to go and execute against that. I think the rule changes, the roster rule changes that everybody's aware are potentially coming in, like, that's going to be really interesting to see how they impact things, and that's something that we've built into our model now, and we're looking at kind of what that means for us from a roster perspective. So there's some interesting times ahead, but I think from my point of view, the foundational piece of the roster, I think, is really strong right now, and it's then augmenting that with players that are going to take us up a level.
I want to get into that rule change here in just a sec. We got to take a quick break, talk about our friends over at Toyota. We've had the Rapids Raft 4Runner parked right here at DNVR a couple times. Toyota, the official vehicle of DNVR. Look, they got the trucks, they got the SUVs, they got the new 4Runner, the new Land Cruiser. They are as built for Colorado as anybody. They also offer 17 models with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, and they have more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 different hybrids, including the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like RAV4 and the Grand Highlander. Visit your Front Range Toyota stores at a location near you. AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe and Centennial. Corwin Toyota in Boulder. Groove Toyota in Littleton. Mountain States Toyota in Denver. Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora. And Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Toyota is a proud partner of the Colorado Rapids and the official vehicle of DNVR. We are also brought to you by our friends at Lavello Construction.
Lavello.
It's so good.
They'll eventually hire me.
Yeah. You're a jingle guy now.
That's what I am.
That's the next incarnation of Yaya.
That's the next phase. He's in his jingle
writer.
era, yeah. Lavello Construction specializes in all things roofs, gutters, siding, and paint for your home here in the Front Range. Women owned and operated with over 17 years of experience. When storms strike and your home faces the aftermath, call or text Lavello to schedule an appointment. Just like the Rapids on the pitch, they bring experience, precision, and a winning spirit to restoring your home's exterior to better than it was before. They understand the complexities of navigating insurance claims after storm damage and are there to make the process as smooth as a well-executed play. From assessing the damage to working with your insurance provider, they are there to help. They also have experience working as insurance adjusters, so who better to understand the process and know what to look for? With Lavello Construction by your side, you can rest easy knowing that seasoned professionals are championing, that's a tough one, championing your cause. Let them help you rebuild and restore your home with confidence. Just scan the QR code. It's right there. It's right below Duane, right there. Scan that QR code or just call 303-578-8551. That's 303-578-8551 to get your quote in under a minute and tackle those claims together. Go Rapids from your friends at Lavello Construction. All right, we're back. DNVR Rapids. We're live in the Toyota Lounge. We got Yaya. We got Duane. Midge here with Rapids President Padraig Smith.
Can I just say something about Duane's shoes? Like,
Sure.
those kicks are legit.
By all means.
I've got the exact same pair. I think they're absolutely fantastic.
Wow.
I'm really annoyed I didn't wear them today. But yeah, they're pretty special.
Did you get the blue?
I like it.
You got to go to Amazon and get the light blue laces.
So
and
I've got both. I've got the burgundy with the blue, and I've got the blue with the burgundy.
Nice.
Look at
Yeah.
that.
See,
Yeah.
I knew you had
Adidas
style.
produced with those.
I know.
Get
Yeah,
a
they're
fit
good.
off.
They're
You
good.
love to see it.
We're gonna clip that part. Cam.
Yep. Make sure we.
No, we're not, Kel. Don't let
Duane
him.
gets a fashion
Duane
compliment.
shoes.
That is crazy.
GM approved. President approved.
Wow. Wow. What a sign off. You brought it up there in our last little bit of conversation before the break, but new rules coming down from MLS in terms of the roster. Now, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because we are not capologists or rules masters by any stretch of the imagination. Not our lane. The ability to drop a DP slot this summer, add a under 22 initiative slot, and receive essentially free GAM for dropping that DP slot. Does that sound right?
You have to buy the GAM.
You have to buy the
It's
GAM.
not free GAM.
Not free.
Not free GAM, no.
See, this is why we
It's an
need.
important distinction
Yeah.
as well. I think that's a really
You gotta
important
convert some of that real money to funny money.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
conversion rate.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Well,
But
Garter
a
bucks.
one-to-one cash to GAM is a good conversion rate.
Oh, it is.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
It's usually like 4-1.
Really?
I wouldn't go that far, but it's
Yeah,
a hard
yeah.
thing. Like we've explored some trades in the past with teams. Like we always like trying to see how you can do something that's a little bit different. So we've explored some trades where it would be like that, where there'd be elements of a player coming or a player going that has a certain cash commitment attached to them, and how do you work out then what the GAM equivalent would be? They're really difficult. They're really difficult. Like we need a market for this that we can just like peg it. But one to one, like GAM is certainly more valuable due to the fact that it's you can use it in more ways, so it's more valuable in the salary cap calculations than cash.
Mm-hmm.
So a 1-to-1 conversion rate there is pretty good.
You were just telling us moments ago about how much you like to build the young teams. So if I had to guess, before I ask you what you would prefer going forward, I would guess you want to drop a TB slot and add an under 22.
Yeah, I think ultimately you can kind of look at this as a 3-3 or a 3-3 or a 2-4-2 essentially with the different systems. Like, I do feel the most important thing is flexibility. Like, that's the most important thing when you're going to buy or when you're going to build out the roster, is to have the ability to bring in different pieces in different ways and really build ultimately the group that you want to build. So from our perspective, I think 2 DPs, 4 U22 slots, and an additional $2 million in GAM would be a really interesting way to go about building a roster. You need to understand, though, that if you're converting a DP or you have a DP that is a TAM eligible DP, then do you have to use some GAM on that to buy him down to be cap compliant? So does that eat into the additional GAM that you're adding? So in the first kind of year or so, there's going to be, or 18 months in this case, because we'll see it the second half of this year and then all of next year, like there may be some teams that don't quite do what they would like to do long term as they transition through that. Like, so I think that'll be an interesting component of this. I think you're going to see a split, which I think is great. I think we could do with more originality. We could do with more differences when it comes to roster build. Not everybody has to be built the same way. The Colorado Rapids do not need the same strategy as every other team in MLS. Like, that's not what we see globally, and I don't think that's ultimately good for the league. So I think this is really good to bring additional flexibility into the system. I think certainly we will look to evolve to that model, to the 2-4-2 model. Whether that happens this summer, winter, next summer.
So there's time where it doesn't have to be this summer, and then that's your chance to do that.
No. Okay. This is something that will be done every year.
Oh, wow.
So it's, teams can move between the systems depending on what suits them in any given moment. So I think it's really important that everybody just understands what it's going to mean for their roster. I think for us, we've talked about depth before. We've talked about the demands of the game model that we're going to have. Like, we do need players that can step in. We need players that can maintain a particular level and a particular standard, as other guys need a rest as well. So for me, a deep, well-rounded roster is going to be an important piece of succeeding at altitude and succeeding with our game model. So I think we'll look to evolve to that, but it isn't necessarily something that will happen immediately either. And there's merit to both. There's not one right way here of doing it, and I think that's important.
One of those other rules is you can actually now buy out a contract, kind of just release a player and just go in the rest of their contract. Is that something that's going to be a big part of kind of like mediating mistakes sometimes? Not that any player's a mistake, of course. Like, their family loves them for a reason, right? But how does that play into your strategy as well? Kind of having that leverage now and having that other option.
So it's an extra one. It's an extra buyout. There's always been one buyout. I think one of the misnomers there is that it almost like, again, this idea that it's free. It's not, right? You have to
you still have to give them the money. Their contract.
Exactly. So you still have to account for it somewhere, whether that's in your cash budget, whether that's on the cap. And you'll see this all the time. Like, I think if people truly understood the number of players that get moved with teams holding some of the caps charge, like, I think they would be amazed by that. I mean, like, you guys are all well aware, like, Kevin Cabral's on our team, but Galaxy are still paying over 50% of his salary every year. Like, that's something that's
crazy.
Plays to our advantage in this moment in time. And we've done the same in circumstances, not to the same level, but we've done the same. So there's different mechanisms behind it. I think it's one of the frustrating things. Like, I mean, the public get to see these numbers that come out from the union every year, and they're just not reflective of the real cap or the real spend situation. Don't include transfer fees. They don't include extra GAM that's generated through transfer sales, and you're recouping some of that and bringing that into the market. There's just so many different nuances to it that doesn't really allow for an accurate understanding of what's going on. But like, one of the things that we always talk about is we're going to use any mechanism that we can that we think is going to make us better. Like, that's part and parcel of it. Like, we bought out a contract this year. We bought out Gershbach's contract, and that was something that we felt we needed to do to take the next step. We believe Jackson Travis has got a bright future in this league, and I think we saw that against Vancouver. He came in, slotted in. Obviously, he made his debut. I think it was against Portland, but that was his first start, and the young man slotted in and did really well. And this is a number 10 that was identified by our academy group, brought in, converted to a left back, and is now a viable option at left back. And, we're now looking at 2 homegrown left backs pushing each other. Like, these things are important to us. And I think, it was really, really key that, again, we used that mechanism this year because we felt that we had a good young player that we wanted to bring through and we wanted to get more game time for. So we'll use every mechanism that's available to us that we think is going to make us better and more competitive.
Kind of going off that, you've talked a lot about how you like to build a roster. Kind of you want it through the academy and kind of bring in guys to help out the academy kids. When you're looking at world football, which team do you model the Rapids after as somebody that's in charge of all these decisions at the end?
Yeah, it's funny. I got asked that question recently by someone else as well. Like, and it's a really difficult one because I think the global landscape has changed so much in recent times. You have the emergence of multi-club structures at a level that we really didn't see 4 or 5 years ago. It was starting slow. People would have pointed to City Football Group, Red Bulls, but now you just have so many, and that's changed the dynamic of player development to a certain extent because players can be moved around within a group structure, and they're not necessarily just coming up through a youth academy. I think the clubs that we would look to, are going to be clubs that will always give young players an opportunity. I think that's really important, and as I said, I have to take responsibility for that over the last couple of years. That maybe we weren't doing that enough. 22 and 23. Despite that being a really good opportunity, right? When things aren't going well, why not turn to the younger players? And we didn't see it. And I think in hindsight, we would have liked to have given Moise Bombito, many more games last year and kind of accelerated his development. Although we've seen how quick his development has been in over the course of, the last few games that Chris Little gave him last year and now the games that he's played this year. But we'll continuously look around the world. And I do think the age profiles globally are decreasing. You are seeing younger and younger players make an impact at bigger and bigger clubs globally now. I don't know if you guys are aware of the CIES, the Center for. I believe it's a French, so I'm gonna, despite the fact I lived in Switzerland for so long, I'm gonna butcher it. But it's a center that does a lot of research on global trends in football, and they produce a lot of really interesting bulletins. And you'll see, the number of young players breaking through is quite remarkable right now. And I think the work that's been done by Brian Crookham, by Chris Cartledge, is really terrific to provide our younger players with a platform for them to push through. So one of the things that we measure on a monthly basis is the number of players that are playing up a grade. So are you a U14 eligible player that's playing U15, U15 playing U17, or is it switches U16 playing U18, that playing into the second team? Like, it's something that we want to do. So we look around the world at clubs, and they can change. They can really change, because as coaches come and go, philosophies tend to change. That's something that we don't want to have. We want to have a club philosophy that closest clubs or that coaches buy into and come into. But we're always looking at good examples of young players getting opportunities around the world. That's
just,
and all of those young players coming up are on Real Madrid's front line, basically.
yeah.
But it's a great example, right? You look at Real Madrid and Barcelona, two of the biggest clubs in the world.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to put 17 and 18-year-old kids out there.
Yeah.
It's really important. Man City, I would say the same. Like, they can spend as much money as they want to spend, but they'll still give a Rico Lewis an opportunity. Like, it's important. Yeah, it's important.
You mentioned Moise. Right now, as a Rapids fan, it feels like it's borrowed time with Moise. Just at the level he's been playing, like even with Canada and everything. What is the buzz that you have heard from other teams in the league around the world? How is he perceived in the global market right now?
Great question.
He's perceived very well.
Yeah, I think CC even mentioned that to me. He was like, I've been getting calls.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're well aware. I mean, look, every call I have around, with other GMs or presidents around the league, it's the same thing. When they're asking about players on our team that are of interest to them, his name's the first name, and he's obviously, an untouchable, for want of a better phrase, right? Everybody's got a price, but at the end of the day, Moise, I don't know what offer of GAM would would need all the GAM in circulation. I think, Moise has had a terrific season, but there's a lot for Moise to continue to work on. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the really important thing. And what we've shown here is an ability to get our younger players to a level where they can move to really important teams. Austin Trusty was desperate to move to a European club that had put an offer in for him. And like I spent hours talking to Austin and just saying, just wait, like believe in what we're doing and we will get you something even better. And fair play to Austin. Austin bought into it. Like he bought into the plan and then ultimately he's gone on and he's played an entire season in the Premier League, right? That is an incredible achievement for Austin. And despite the challenges that they had at Sheffield United last year, like no one can take that away from him. He's a Premier League player. Yeah. He has put in like an incredible amount of effort to get there. Cole could have gone to numerous different clubs, but he bided his time and he went to Feyenoord. You know, Sam went to a team that's winning titles in Belgium and playing in the top competitions in Europe. Mm-hmm. That's important. You know, it's really important. I think the days of MLS teams selling players to teams that will ultimately just be feeders into another level, that needs to end. Like we are more than capable of developing players, providing them with a platform to grow and then having them move to the very top. If a Premier League team wants to come and have a chat, or a Champions League team, or a high-end elite Europa League team wants to come and have a chat about Moise Bombito, like that makes sense to me. But right now, Moise has got two and a half years to go on his contract. We love him. I know he enjoys being here. Obviously, he's an ambitious kid. Yeah. He wants to test himself and go to the very highest levels. And that's part of a global soccer ecosystem, right? That's good. That's a good thing. But I know that, and Moise would say it himself, right? The masters of the basics, right? He has still got to work on a number of these things. I sent him a message before the Dutch game and kind of said, look, believe in yourself. Like you're good enough to compete with the very best. And I think that's an important message for him. But to do that week in and week out, there's still a long way to go for Moise. Like unbelievable talent, unbelievable guy. I've said this all along. The best interview I ever did with a college kid as part of the combine, you know, a slam dunk for us at number 3. Probably the best part of the Mark Anthony K trade at this stage, right? Was that we got Moise Bombito.
It's not even close.
Yeah. We got a lot out of that trade, but that was obviously a big part of it. Look, the ceiling is very, very high for Moise, but we still feel like Moise can do a lot here, and our aim would obviously be for Moise to excel, help us win. And then if the right moment, the right opportunity comes along for him, we'll look at that. But again, one of the great things about our ownership group, we're not under any pressure to sell. We're not looking for a quick deal here. This has got to be the right thing for Moise, the right thing for the club. Everybody has got to benefit from this. And that's something that really puts us in a position of strength. So we're certainly not out there looking to move Moise Bombito. We see him as being an absolutely critical part of the core that we've built here. Again, talked about it before, good age profile, good character, loved in the locker room, exactly the type of person that we want here at the Rapids, and we'll see what the future brings. But I know that to get to the level that Moise wants to get to, it means he's excelled here.
You mentioned ownership groups having clubs, and obviously Kroenke having Arsenal, about as successful, second in the Premier League, champion.
As successful as Arsenal can be.
As successful as Arsenal has been, really, in a long time. Has there been discussions about, Jack... why am I blanking on his name? He was a rumor mill coaching candidate. Yeah, Wilshere is running the under 18s. Yeah. Has there been any conversations about, having the Rapids kind of be a step between there and Premier League for some of their players in the Kroenke ecosystem?
I mean, I think we look at it all the time, and we talk about how best we can utilize the scale of our organization. But it doesn't just stop with Arsenal. Sure. It's the easy comparison, but we've got access to some of the best sporting minds in the country here. You don't have to look too far around our organization to see a lot of trophies, right? You've got the Super Bowl winners with the Rams. You've got the Avs and Nuggets who've both won titles, and have some of the most exciting players in the history of their sport, right? And I really loved, the opportunity that I had to talk to Joe and to talk to Chris, to talk to Tim Connolly and Calvin when we were starting our rebuild back in 2018, and really glean from them a lot of insight into what they did to turn their teams around back then. So really, really interesting in terms of how we can utilize this. Obviously having Kevin Demoff now in charge of all of these teams really takes that to another level. We spent time with the Rams. I sat in on a lot of their draft preparations, which was absolutely fascinating. And, you're trying to get best practice. And when you've got an organization, the scale of which we have, like you want to take advantage of every single part of it. And you would be surprised where those advantages come. Like, you know, I had an hour-long conversation this morning with Matt Bell, who heads up all of our venues. Those are fantastic insights because he's talking about, well, we see this in Paramount, we see this in Ball, we see this out at Dix. Okay, how can we learn about these things, like in everything that we do? With Arsenal, like we have a really good relationship with those guys. Adu has been terrific. Richard Garlick's terrific. Even Mikel, when he came over, like, and it's fascinating watching an ice hockey game with him, right? And he's talking about the similarities and the desire to create space and how you take advantage of space. And he's like, that's no different than football, right? Like it really isn't. I think there's a gap. Like, let's be honest, the Premier League is soccer at a level that we're not at yet. Like, we're really not. And it would be foolish for us to think that's an easy step. Yeah, like it's not. So you have to be realistic about these things and understand when it works. It worked with Austin Trusty. Austin went over, and I'm incredibly proud of Austin. Like, he has played games with an Arsenal shirt on. They may have been preseason games, but no one can take that away from him. And it meant that he was able to very quickly prove that he belongs in the Premier League and that he can play in the Premier League. Right. Cole Bassett's been over there. Adam Beaudry's been over there. Darren Yapi's been over there. Like, they understand and see the talent level that's coming through here in the United States in general. And, you know, we want to be able to
that's cool.
utilize those relationships as best we can. But it's, you know, it's not, I wouldn't say it's always going to come about in the area that people think it is. It's not just about the fluid movement of players. Like, you look at the multi-club structures, it's not like Man City are sending a ton of players to New York City, or Leipzig and Salzburg, a ton of players to Red Bull. It just doesn't necessarily work like that. A lot of it is best practices. A lot of it is the behind-the-scenes stuff, like utilizing the scale from a scouting, best practices in medicine, best practices in performance. These are the kind of areas where I think you can really take advantage of that scale. It's not as visible to other folks, but there's a lot of that going on. Like, and we'll have op staff go to Arsenal. Like, you know, Chris Cartledge is going to go over there in terms of what he's doing from a technical perspective. Like, this is all really important in terms of how we continue to grow the club as well. So while it might not be as visible to folks, there's a lot going on, a lot of collaboration between the KSE family teams, and it's helping all of us.
Nice question from Wanderers in the Toyota chat there, presented by the 2024 4Runner. Is there a salary contract ceiling for player at Bombi's age? We've seen Cole's salary gradually grow as he's progressed here. Could Bombi realistically stay if paid well for years to come? In other words, is there a world where Bombi's window to leave closes and he just stays here long term?
I like this. It just looks like it's a direct trap between you guys and Wanderers.
That's right.
Like, this is good.
That happens a lot. Wanderers is our guy in the chat for sure.
Wanderers is awesome. He's a great dude. Maybe he wants to be Bombito's agent. I don't know. We'll have to connect with him. Like,
I'm sure he would be into that. Yeah.
Especially with that payday coming.
I would also take that right now.
Yeah, it's a great question, to be honest, and it's something that obviously, you know, we continue to think about. Like, we want to make sure that our players are, you know, compensated commensurate with their performances. Like, that's an important part of that. And it's never going to be an exact science, right? Like, that's part and parcel of this. Like, in terms of whether or not there's a ceiling, ultimately there's not, right? You can have a homegrown player or a draft pick who goes on to become a DP. That is possible. But I think there's stages to all of this, like, and there's a natural progression. I think Cole's a great example of that. Like, Cole's probably, you know, if you look at, you know, comes back into the academy at 14, 15, is signing by 16, you know, performing very, very quickly, gets the opportunity in Europe, decides, okay, I think it's actually best to come back to MLS, decides to come back when there were other opportunities for Cole. And I think that showed a really, you know, the maturity that Cole has. But he's like, look, this is where I think I'm going to be best fit. Again, comes back, performs, earns the new contract. And then I would say continues to earn that, like, you know, with his performance over the course of the year. So that's possible. I think the addition of a U22 initiative, again, people's first reaction to that will be, that means you go and buy players from abroad. Well, not necessarily. You can sign homegrown players to U22 initiatives or domestic players, and there's actually nuances to the homegrown or to the U22 initiative that allows a homegrown to be treated in a slightly different way than a player from outside the league.
Right, because Cole just signed U22
exactly.
being older than 22.
Yeah, so there's differences and kind of nuances to all these things. So, you know, I think, look, the most important thing for Moise right now is focusing on his development. There is a lot of work to be done, and he would admit to this. He didn't feel like he had his best performances over the last couple of weeks, you know, and that was really important to him then, that he's able to go to Copa, go into camp with Canada, Thankfully, we've got a coach who continues to play the same kind of style that we want to play, right? It's a very similar style. So he's going to continue to progress in that way. He's going to get to race Alphonso Davies, I presume, and see who is the quickest. But it's
Got to be Bombi.
Yeah, I hope so.
Bombi's faster than Tyreek Hill.
He's quick.
We've learned.
He's quick. But I think, look, the most important thing is consistency.
Right.
Like, nobody wants a player who's just going to be up and down.
Sure.
Like, have great performances, but then terrible performances. Like, and I think most people would tell you they would take somebody who's going to give you a 7 every day of the week rather than an 8 one week and a 6 the next week. Now, someone like Bombi, can he give you an 8 every week? Can he get to that level? That's going to be, a really important part of this. But I think we're going to continue to watch his development. What I know is that we've got a coaching staff who are going to continue to work on him.
Sure.
In Chris Armas, he's got somebody who is going to hammer home the importance of those basics.
Sure.
It's almost become a running joke, but it's not. Because if you want to succeed at the very highest levels of the game, you can't mess up the basics. That's what they do. It's not about doing the spectacular thing. It's about doing the basics consistently at a high level over and over and over and over again. It's monotonous, it's boring, but it is what gets you to the very top of the game.
Real quick, one last question, because I know we're kind of pushing on time.
Yeah, I wanted to hit summer window, so go.
Real quick, Yapi has been a big point of contention. He's been struggling a lot with the MLS lately. Have you guys explored giving him another opportunity, maybe with another team
Great
with
question.
USL? And also in the same kind of breath, Zach has also had not the greatest month in May, but he does have Adam Beaudry breathing down his neck. I know he brings a lot to the leadership aspect and to improving just in bringing up the floor. But what kind of pressure does Zach have on him, having a guy like Adam right behind him?
So I think it's really interesting. I think it shows the difference, right, between a fan-centric approach and what you take from a club perspective, right? Darren Yapi's 19 years of age.
Of course,
like
yeah.
he's, Darren's a kid, and for anybody at his age to have played the minutes he's played,
He's up to almost 2,000, right?
yeah,
in the MLS?
it's terrific from a developmental perspective. Like, would we like Darren to have scored a goal? Yes, of course. Like, it goes without saying. Nobody, and I promise you this, nobody is more disappointed and frustrated at that as Darren. And one of the biggest things that we've actually got to work with Darren on at the moment is understanding that is not the be-all and end-all. Like, the history of soccer is littered with players that have scored 1 or 2 goals, right? I'll bring you back to your Man United days.
Oh,
like,
God, why
you look at a
my
Mikado,
club
right?
takes shots.
Who scores a big goal against Aston Villa
Yes.
back in the day and is realistically not heard from again at that level. Like, we are working with Darren, like, to improve on some of the key elements of a number 9's game. He has got to be able to create the first push against the centre half. He's got to be able to establish his ground. He's got to be able to link with the teammates better. He's got to be able to run into the channel better. He's got to be able to stretch the field better. These are things that our coaches are working on with him on a consistent basis. We know Darren can score. Darren is scoring goals at the next pro level. Like, he has scored goals. Like, we know he can do that at the academy level. We know he can score goals. He has got to kind of develop his overall game and got to continue going with that. But working with Darren on not getting too down on himself because he simply hasn't hit the back of the net is a key part of his development. Like, again, if Darren's got 3 goals, would this be a different conversation? If he's got 5 goals, like, what is the number?
Yeah.
Sure, breaking through is going to be huge for our supporters and our fans. They want to see that goal. But it's not the only thing. And from a club perspective, as we look at his development, Chris Little does a really, really nice job of breaking out the different stages. We know the amount of minutes that we want each of these players to have. Do we look at other opportunities for him? Yeah, we do. We think about that. But at the end of the day, training with the first team, going up against a Bombito and a Maxu, that's really good for his development. Getting into these MLS games and playing well in MLS games and then having moments where he's not playing well in MLS games. Yeah. That is all part and parcel of the development process. So from that perspective, sure, we want to get him a goal. I keep telling him it is going to come. You are going to score a goal. That's not going to turn you into the world's best striker either. The consistent development of all aspects of his game, that's what's going to be important. And that's what ultimately is going to lead to him scoring goals consistently as his career comes along. We signed Darren to a 6-year contract. You know,
you guys have time.
He's got time, and he's part of a pathway. But I get it. I understand why the frustration is there. But as I said, believe you me, no one is more frustrated at that than Darren, and that's a big piece of it.
Do you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No. Do you figure that part of the process into the summer window, where maybe you do look for a MLS goal scorer to sort of supplement that bench attack. That kind of profiles like Yapi as a true 9.
Yeah, you can say Don Bashi. That's okay.
Yeah, bring him
use
back.
The word. Let's go. I mean, I
breaking? No, just kidding.
No. I mean, I love Dom. Like, he was my first draft pick, right? Like, I mean, I didn't get the early draft picks. That was my first year, but he came in the 4th round back in 15 out of Boston, and what a guy, first and foremost. And I did joke with him and his agent. I've kind of said the only place he's ever really scored goals consistently is here, right? He feels at home here. But it's a delicate balance again, like, because as I talk about, wanting to build for the future, you've got to make sure that you're bringing in players that fit with that long term. The more often you do things that are short term in nature, the more that's going to derail what you're trying to do longer term. And again, it comes down to, like, we have to be consistent. I talk about that in player development. It may sound boring, it may be boring, but it is the critical factor. If you want, and if you have a plan that you want to execute against, you have got to execute against it. You've got to continue to do that. So you've got to look at how that impacts other players. Johnny Lewis is coming back as well, right? He's had a tough time with fitness, but he has really dedicated himself. He's dropped some weight. He looks as sharp as he's looked. Calvin Harris is going to need to get minutes. Omir's getting minutes. Yapi's going to need to continue to get minutes. Like, we have other guys that can play in the 9 as well. So that's something that we're looking at. And if we do bring in, if we can get this deal done for Rafa, we're not bringing him in to not play, right?
Sure,
so you want him to be there. So while we need to have other complementary pieces and depth, it can't come at the expense of some of the things that we're looking to do from a long-term perspective as well. So we continue to evaluate all of those, but I think we've got our priorities in terms of what we're looking to do there.
Yeah, I kind of want to wrap with this and jump in if there's something else that you guys are burning to ask. You've talked about Jackson Travis, and you obviously have Seb, so maybe you're hesitant to bring in an outside back. You have a pretty deep midfield that we talked about early in the show. You just talked about how deep the attack is with wingers and Rafa up top. I guess, is it just sort of like, what's the best deal we can make when you look at a summer window like this? Or is there like, oh no, we need this specific position, we need this specific player? Because like you said, there is depth at these positions, supplemented by homegrowns and academy kids and young guys. So when you approach a summer window on a team that's found some success early like this, how is it picking spots like that?
So again, it's long-term in nature, and I'm really happy that everybody is on the same page right now in terms of like what we're looking to do over an extended period of time. So you are going to be opportunistic. Like we always want to be opportunistic. If something comes up that we think is of particular value in a position that we feel is going to be a need, maybe that need is 12 months out, maybe it's 6 months out, maybe it's immediate, we want to be able to execute on that. So we want to have that kind of flexibility to go and do that. We know what positions we're going to need over the next 3 to 4 transfer windows.
Sure.
Like that's where we are right now. So it's maybe being, as you said, being opportunistic in that spot. We do want a 6. We've been very vocal about that. I loved Ollie's response. Like I spoke to Ollie recently and told him like just how proud I was of what he had done and how he had built in. And I was like, but look, I'm not going to stop, right? Our job as a front office is to continue to bring in players that are going to push you, and it's your job to continue to beat them out. And he was just like, bring it on. Let's go. and that's what you want to see from these guys. Like, you talk about making the team better all the time, always bringing in players that are going to challenge what we have here, always going to the next level. I really like the core group that we've got. I like a lot of the depth that we have right now. We are going to continue to bring in players, be it in this window, be it in the winter, that makes the team better. We're always going to try and keep it fresh. But I think we're in a position now where we are being very selective and very careful, because there are only particular players that are going to make us better.
Sure.
We're not trying to build a status quo here. We are on a pathway and on a journey, because we are not there. We are not going to be able to play the style of football we fully want for a little bit of time yet. Players still have to adapt to it, but I do want this team to have the opportunity to gel.
Okay.
Omir, Georgie, Rafa, they have not played a huge amount of football together. They
not
really
even 20
haven't.
games
So they've
yet.
got to keep going on that. So it's an exciting time. We've got the ability to do things, and we've got everybody pointing in the right direction. I think we're back to, speaking of basics, I think we're back to our basics that we've talked about, and I certainly think we're in a good position right now.
Rafa came in, didn't get on the Leagues Cup roster. You mentioned Lamine kind of just being late to preseason. Is there any urgency to get deals done faster this window? Or earlier in the window, I should say. Maybe not faster because the deal's a long process, but...
Yeah, I mean, again, like, speed should never come at the expense of getting the right player.
Sure.
Like, you always want to do things quicker. But at the end of the day, getting the right player is right. We believe in what we do from this perspective. We're always tweaking it. We're always trying to learn from it, as I said we would with the Lamine situation. But, like, we want to make sure that we are going out and getting, first and foremost, people that are going to come in and have a positive impact, fit in with our culture, fit in with our team and our group, and can ultimately execute against the game model that we built. Sometimes that takes time. It took Rafa 6 months to probably get fully acclimatized. Other players, it can take a year. So on some of the higher end things and things coming from outside the league, we are going to continue to look at loan deals because we do not want to handcuff ourselves on deals that maybe aren't the right fit once we get the player in the building, because you can do as much due diligence as you want. It's only when they're sitting there beside each other in a locker room do you truly know whether or not they are a good fit for the group. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to look at young players. We'll continue to look at domestic players first. That will be our bread and butter. But you always want to make sure you've got players from abroad. Look at Maxu. I think Maxu has had a really underrated season this year. You know, and again, probably easy to overlook him, but, you know, I think, you know, Brøndby fans, Brøndby players, Brøndby coaches and staff would have talked about what a great leader he was there. We're seeing that come through now. Like, we're seeing that, and I think people are clear about it. Like, it takes time to adapt into this league, which is why we kind of steer towards the domestic player first and foremost. But ultimately, it's making sure we've got the right characters, the right people with the right mentality to play our game model and to be able to take the club forward.
Guys, I think that's all the time we got. Thanks for coming.
Pleasure to be here. Love it.
Yeah, you want to start us plugging out of here?
DNV _Rapids on Twitter. Please follow us there. 5-star review wherever you hear this podcast. Apple, Google, Stitcher, don't matter. Just 5-star review. Drop a like on this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're very close to 100K. We'd appreciate it if we could get there by, let's say, Leagues Cup 20K.
All right, Leagues Cup. That's fair. Yeah.
Get us there, guys. Back to you, Mitch.
Well, I was going to ask Duane, but I'll take it. Become a diehard at thednvr.com. Get access to all the fun stuff. Discounts on events, bar tab, merchandise, behind the paywall, in the Discord channel. You maybe even get in the Madden League if you're lucky. It's a competitive one.
Yep.
We got to get in EAFC.
We have a tournament coming up as well, just so you guys are at the bar.
At the bar. Tons of events coming up. Check that all out at thednvr.com. More important than all of that, baby, up the pits.
We all silly like the mayor.